Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Downroll here on Wicked Studios LLC. We're going to talk about the importance of character death by edition in Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yes.
So, I don't know about you, but my DM kills my characters all the time. So this seems like an apropos discussion for us, and maybe it'll be a little therapy for me,
right? And you know what? And it's disproportionate the amount of people that I kill because
you've only killed me. I think.
I can't remember the last time I killed another character.
Well, my characters go down like flies when I'm around you.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, and one actually died by sturges, which are a close proximity to a fly. So that's
true.
That was also a pretty appropriate metaphor.
Yeah.
So let's start with the big question: Why is character death important in Dungeons and Dragons? What do you think, Will?
Well, I know.
By the way, we didn't introduce ourselves. I'm Adam. That's Will DM.
Hi, I'm Will DM.
You can see it on the little thing below us.
I don't know how it's going to come up on the video, so I'll just point both directions. He's Adam. Yeah. I'm Will DM.
You're like the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz.
Right?
Anyway, so why is character death important? Or is it? I don't know.
It actually, contrary to popular belief, because there's now a very prevalent belief. Well, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Death is important in the game because it is the ultimate drama builder. It's the ultimate, to make the situations in which the characters find themselves feel real, like there's something that could be lost. That, let's put it this way: if there was no death, the sense of accomplishment would be way low.
You might as well just play a board game.
Exactly. It's like you play to win, you go, it's great. If there's no ultimate sacrifice that could happen, then it just lessens everything else that's involved in the game.
It's kind of like those, and I'm going to go video game here for a little bit, but it's kind of like those video games now where even if you die, you're not really dead.
Yes,
you can save a million times.
And there is, sticking with this whole video game as an example, there is a market out there for people who don't want that. And a great example is the Dark Souls games. They are relentlessly hard.
Yeah.
And it is a fantasy-based game, even, and there's no holding hands. People can die really easy if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and there's real loss that you can have as far as your character's equipment and different things along these lines.
But now I'm going to segue into the first edition D&D. In the early editions, there was a lot more death of characters, right?
Very
you
much
could go through, like you could die and go through like 3 characters, before you even get to the entrance of the dungeon or whatever you're going to do.
Oh, yeah. Well, what people don't understand is that with the evolution of the game when it starts, the game starts coming out of wargaming, where there was
you think death would be prevalent.
Which it is. And that's the thing. The
war never changes.
It never changes. Did you see that post I had of the dog smoking the cigarette after the 4th of July? And it's like the explosions, they change you, man. But anyway, when D&D first came out, now you're talking OD&D, the original.
Right, we're talking the original.
Now this is
OG D&D.
Correct. This is steeped in everybody who's playing it. These guys are all coming out of wargamer backgrounds, and in the war game background, when you're reenacting a battle, you have skin in the game because your units and how you use your units, and if they die and they're taken off the field, directly dictates how well you win or win the battle.
But it's effectively a game of Battleship.
Correct. Now, when D&D came around, it was a game of, they had, well, first of all, it's directly connected with the evolution of fantasy as well. Okay, when D&D's first coming out, the number one influence. Now, a lot of people automatically go back and they say that the number one influence was Tolkien,
Right. Lord of the Rings and all that.
Which is not correct. The number one influence fantasy-wise on OD&D was Conan,
like pulp novels.
In the pulps, exactly.
Like
Hero, it was
pulp novels.
Hero and human centric, and Gygax put in the Tolkien stuff as it was gaining in its popularity. Tolkien didn't start getting popular until the late 60s, and then through the 70s, it kept building. But by the time the 80s starts to roll around, that's when it's really at its height and all this different stuff and becomes this monster. Well, you see the evolution of that in the D&D game, too.
Now, would you call the original D&D? Now, I haven't played first edition.
Now this is first edition.
This is even the original, so this is even before first edition.
This is before first edition, and people, when you were playing first edition,
you think they would just consider that first edition, wouldn't you?
Well, because first
like their
edition
numbering system.
Well, you would think, but it's everybody likes their acronyms and all that different stuff. So, and not to mention, it does kind of sound cool to go OD&D.
OD&D,
original D&D, but. That when they're playing OD&D and they're starting off with that, it's not the focus of that game was more tactical.
Right. So it's a strategy game more than an RPG is what I'm asking.
Correct. Yeah. It is not as story driven as it. Now, granted, that was the thing that started the role playing is because people liked inhabiting that.
Well, because and also this is now the first time, especially for these war gamers, but the first time you're looking at an individual person versus, groups of right.
Correct, and that's so. What they're doing,
battalions. I was thinking of that. Was
right, platoons and what have you.
Yeah. So you're looking at you don't have that individual connection that you would now playing a person or an elf or a dwarf or whatever it is.
But the whole point of view that they looked at it as is they looked at it like it was hard. It's supposed to be hard, and to them, the originally playing D&D. Death was a part of it. Now, it is to the point
life,
too.
Circle of
it
life.
Is yes, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize is that when Dungeons and Dragons was first starting off, and they were first starting to do conventions, and have people coming to play tournament modules and things along these lines, it was the dungeon master's job, believe it or not, to kill as many characters as possible.
It's almost like, and they talk about. I don't know who they are, but they talk about especially with the esports growth and all of that, like Dungeons and Dragons, like in esports, it seems like OD&D would be much better for that type of thing versus any newer edition because you're only you don't care about your character really. Let's be honest. You're just there to survive as long as you can.
Right. And they're actually starting to try and do that, make tournaments based on those lines. But the way they're doing it is that I've heard so far, which all they need to do is go and look back at the original, how it started. They're bringing these characters in and then they're pitting the characters in a dungeon and then they're pitting them against each other and all this different stuff.
So it's like
you don't have to do that.
No, because
right. Yeah, which totally ruins it. Now, the original way they did it was all these players would show up. They'd have all these characters, and the reason that death was such a part of early tournament was because you had to have a winner. So this meant that the DM.
So there was actually winners and losers early on.
Yes, and basically what it is there was a scoring system, and if you were alive at the end, then they went to the scoring and see how well you did. If your character died, that meant that was somebody that was out of the running that won for that tournament game. So it was even built into those earlier games.
So this really was like a war game. Yes,
and the first big module that comes into the tournaments is the Tomb of Horrors. And the Tomb of Horrors is designed to
which we're now playing on every Sunday night. Well, the new one. That's the Tomb of Annihilation.
Of Annihilation, which is a continuation. So what happens is at the beginning, death is just a part of it. But then again, role-playing wasn't as big of a part. Now,
so when did role-playing become bigger in the editions?
Frank Metzner, who starts the RPGA, okay, and the reason that they started up, it's like today's adventure. And what they started that up with is one of the reasons that they were starting it, one, get people introduced into the game and interested in the game. So you create players, you create customers. But two, also because they were trying to foster what they saw was a natural part of, I mean, hell, it's called role playing for a reason. And that's to help foster and build on the role playing. So when you go from OD&D and then you start to get into first edition's the first bridge. Now in first edition, death is still extremely prevalent. If you want to see how prevalent, go sometime, look online. I'm sure you'll be able to find them. Not that I'm condoning anyone or piracy of any sorts, but get your hands on some of the original modules.
You can also go to like a drive-through RPG site and actually pay for these things.
You can get PDFs pretty dirt cheap for these things.
Yeah. So don't steal them because that's not a good thing to do.
That's a no-no.
And that was probably shouldn't have started off the conversation that way.
Well, I was saying don't do it. It's as so
with a wink and a nudge.
Well, you know, I'm just saying the world is how the world is, but I don't condone it. There you go. How about that? That's a pretty good one. So
anyway,
you look at these original modules, the earlier modules, and they're fucking brutal compared to today's standards. I mean, they really don't. Let's put it this way: there is no such thing anymore today as save or die. It doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be. There used to be a thing that's like, oh, hey, and this happens, and your character's dead. So when first edition, when you get AD&D, because you have to say what ended up happening is, and this is probably where the additions come in, because after OD&D, what they did, the next thing they did is they made the first basic Dungeons and Dragons in 1977. And the reason they did that is because they already knew that they were going to get a newer, advanced version coming down the road. And they wanted to get it, and they wanted to make it into much more understandable. And I think Holmes is the guy that they get. He's a psychologist, if I'm not mistaken. He writes the edition so that people could understand what the fuck the rules meant. Because nobody, if you weren't a wargamer, you didn't know. You had to figure it out for yourself. And then when Advanced Dungeons and Dragons comes around, it's still really brutal, but you're seeing a lot more of different rules that are coming in, getting in place, especially when the Dungeon Master Guide comes out for, well, hey, what are your guys going to do with all that loot? You know, bringing to the forefront a lot of these different things that are just really have to do with the role-playing aspect.
So now what was the view of death as we go from OD&D into first and then into second edition?
In second edition, you really see, and second edition comes around, it's either 88, 89, I think it's 89. It comes out, and that's the real big push towards, as much as being tactical, we've got all this role-playing stuff. And I think probably what the big reason behind that big push company-wise is because they realized, hey, if we can provide story for people to use in their role-playing, we can sell a lot more stuff, and it goes hand in hand with the games itself. When second edition rolls around, there's a lot more, and you can definitely see as the editions progress, there's more rules that are in place that help keep characters alive.
Right, but still, it was still pretty dangerous, because I remember I had a character who he was a wizard, and went to open a door because everybody else was afraid to open a door. Literally, the first door we came to in a dungeon.
Yes,
and it was like our second session, right? So we'd spent our time, getting to know the characters and the town, and then we went up to whatever this little thing was, this cave or whatever, and there was a gate. Everyone's afraid to open the gate, including the fucking rogue, by the way. That's your job. Right. Your job is to open the gate.
You got one fucking job, man.
Wouldn't do it. So my character, the wizard, he got frustrated with everybody. He was already frustrated with everyone anyway. He had a short temper, short fuse. Went to open the gate. Go, trapped, poison.
Dead.
First level.
Yeah.
No one can get this poison out of your system.
And you there.
So, and then there was like a few rounds where I'm just sitting there and everybody's trying to figure out what to do, and no one can. Like, some people are trying to suck the poison out of my hand, like a venom bite.
Right.
It didn't matter. I was dead.
Yeah, and what you're experiencing there, what you experienced there, was something that was becoming very well known in the industry and amongst the guys at TSR and the producers. Well, Gygax was gone by the time second edition rolls around, and basically what you have now is people are starting to realize that, hey, people get a lot invested in these characters and stuff. So maybe
it was a moving experience for everybody at the table too.
Yeah, it's not,
even though it was like literally our second or third session,
right? But still, you put a lot of time into that character, and every time somebody starts making a character, especially people who get involved into it, you start to have the images, the ideas, and all this different stuff, and you start making them up. And it's like, great, this is what we're going to do. And so they see this, and there's definitely a transition. And second is like really the bridge, second edition. So where death is still really easy if you're a dumbass, there's also a lot more stuff that's introduced to try and help mediate that so it doesn't happen so often.
Right. Because by now they want you invested in these characters.
Correct, because invested in a character means the character progresses more, and you have more fun, more story,
and then you're going from like just a a game session to a campathird, and now you can go through other modules. And you
it
can
helps
buy
with
more
sales
books.
too.
Yeah,
correct. Now by the time third edition and then 3.5 come along, it's pretty entrenched that you don't want to kill your characters.
Right, especially with all of the work it takes to make a character in third edition. And I never played 3.5. We stuck with third after we did second for most of the time when I was originally gaming.
Right.
But it takes it takes some time now. It's taking about an hour now if you really want to put together, a solid character. I just did it with my kids last weekend. You can also do it in like 5 minutes if you if you need to, which I've had to do because I've died mid-session multiple times.
Still me.
In 5th edition, by the way, we're playing. But in 3rd edition, you don't start a new session unless those characters are already made. Like your first order of business was you get together as a group with the DM, you roll up your characters, and that's going to take you 3 hours.
To coin a phrase, the crunch level got turned up to 11.
Yeah, and I thought third edition was fun.
It was great.
When I came back to D&D a few years ago, I guess it was a little bit after the 5th edition came out. I thought, well, I've got the 3rd edition player's handbook still, right? I'd sold the other stuff, but I had the 3rd edition. I'm like, I'll probably just play this. And I'm looking through these rules, and I'm like, wow, like this, I don't remember this. Like, I don't understand this anymore. Yes. And then a friend of mine said, well, why don't we try Pathfinder? And then I literally ordered the books. I actually paid for the books from Amazon. Right. And I'm reading through them 30 minutes in, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm returning these things, and I'm going to try something else. Then I went to 5th edition D&D, and I'm like, oh, thank God. Yes. So simple to do.
And basically what you're seeing is the evolution of things. When 3rd edition came around, and it had all these really great rules. And there's people out there that really like I've played Pathfinder. I would play Pathfinder again. It's not my first choice by no means.
And I enjoyed it when I played it.
Yeah,
I still think I preferred 2nd edition. Yeah, but I did enjoy 3rd.
Yeah, and so what happens in 3rd is they're still trying to keep they're keeping the characters alive. There's all this different stuff to help do it, but death is still a very serious thing. It's still ever present. It's still really there. Now, what happens now is you're seeing a generational thing that actually also is taking place here, because it's in over 40 years we've got Dungeons and Dragons going on here. As 3rd edition rolls into 4th edition,
right, with
the fan base that they had for their original Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, when Dungeons and Dragons came up and was really huge in the 80s. Computer games didn't hold a torch to it, and even today,
they were terrible.
In a good role-playing game, there is no video game that can compare to it, provided you're into that.
Right. There are some good computer RPGs, but still not the same.
Yeah, exactly. So what ends up happening now is that they're looking to bring in new customers, because the customer base is not growing exponentially for Dungeons and Dragons.
No, it was shrinking like hell at that point.
And so basically what they're looking to do is, hey, we got to tap into this. And so they're going to what had always been a tried and true market for them. And that tried and true market had been the younger people. Right. Well, what they had forgot is that the bulk of the people who were their customer base, these are the guys who've grown up and grown old playing their product. Mm-hmm. So they're not looking to keep them happy anymore. They're looking to get all.
They're going into those World of Warcraft people.
The World of Warcraft people, Millennial Central is where they're going. And what ends up happening is that these new customers, these guys have been weaned and raised on video games. And like you were saying earlier, it's so easy to save. It's so easy to do this. Oh, I got to this part and then I died. Well, then I get back to the last save point and then I continue on. There was all these different things. So the idea of people putting an investment into a character just to have it die like that was, people didn't care.
So how did because I'll be honest, I never played. I read through, I think, the player's handbook and said this is not for me, because I never really liked those MMO RPGs anyway, right. Like a World of Warcraft stuff like that. I never really. I mean, a couple I played a little bit, but I never really got into them. So how did they handle that in 4th edition? How did they handle death?
So in 4th edition, there's a lot of stuff that makes a debut in 4th edition that actually still exists in 5th edition. What 4th edition did, though, was they said, hey, we're going to take pages out of video games. And the big thing we're going to do is we're going to give all these special powers and abilities to these characters, and we're going to make them much more accessible. So it's like back in the day, it's like, okay, well, you're a fighter, you have a sword. Swing, and then that's pretty much all you did. It's like,
this
now
really was like, press V and you do your flaming fly kick.
Exactly. So this is what starts getting introduced in that, and you started.
By the
to
way,
see
I'm going to introduce the flaming fly kick into my next character.
I'm sure you will. We started to see this in 3rd edition because with 3rd edition you got feats that were introduced, which allowed people to customize and sort of give their characters special abilities to do certain things. By the time when 4th edition comes in, it's intricate. It's put into it, and the big thing is what's happened now is. Every character class has a bunch of special abilities they do that you can just basically re-up and recharge, and then you go again. And it was like really quick, and it was really designed so that you could, just like a video game, oh, here's the magic blue pill. I eat that, all my stuff's recharged again. I can keep going, sort of stuff.
So it just made it more difficult to die and easier to win in battles?
Exactly. That's exactly what it did. Because, for the first time, fighters had something called a second wind, which is they could heal themselves.
Right.
And you start to see...
Which I still think is bullshit.
Yeah, I kind of do, too. And for the first thing, what you start
And that's in 5th edition still.
Yes, it is. And you start to see all of the characters having an ability to protect themselves and to heal themselves and help stave off their own death. You start to get death saves and things along these lines.
Weren't there death saves in 3rd edition?
No, there wasn't. In 3rd edition, you had the same thing basically you had in 2nd edition, whereas you could take damage.
Oh, that's right. It would keep going down, level. Right?
Yes. Yeah. So let's say, for example, you had a character that was
So you had to be stabilized because otherwise your hit points kept going down. Is that how it was?
Correct.
That's what it was?
And your hit points you could take as many negative hit points as you had a constitution score. Right. So let's say we have a character that's got a 12 constitution. And then that character has 1 hit point left. It's in a really bad battle. And then some monster comes over and just slaps his ass for 20. Guess what? He's dead.
Now, what happens if you get, hit, you're at -5?
You would use, let's say,
and nobody was able to heal you.
You get hit. What happens is you take damage onto that negative con. So let's say have a con of, just to make it math easy, you have a 15 con, and you took -5 hit points, which gives you 10 points left to your con. If you took another 5 points of damage, you'd have only 5 points of con left before you were completely dead.
God, I'm glad they changed that, though.
Yes, and if you go back and you play those isometric, the Baldur's Gates and all
Yeah.
those different things, you can see when a character goes unconscious that in each round that you could roll for stabilization is basically what it is. And if you didn't stabilize, you took another point of damage and you went closer.
That's
to
what I remember doing. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So, but by the time you get to 4th edition and then into 5th edition, you're making saving throws, and it's you gotta, it's the best of 3, it's like the first one you get to this, but also you start to see probably one of the most broke of all spells is Healing Word.
It is, but
Healing Word,
I'm glad
because
it exists, but
it is at a distance, and it's like, oh, the fighter's down. Boop, Healing Word him. He's back up. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Keep going. And it keeps from having to worry. Because in the olden days, the cleric would have to rush around and try and help people and stuff like this, and put it in.
The clerics had calves of steel.
Yes.
With all the running around on the battlefield.
There's a reason why most clerics were walking tanks that healed, is because they had to put themselves into dangerous spots.
Which is also why nobody wanted to play a cleric, because all they did was just,
rush around and heal.
Pick the dead people up off the floor.
Now, granted, that started to change too as time went on.
Right.
But so what ends up happening now is here we are in the 5th edition. Okay. Yeah. 5th edition is hugely popular. And then 5th edition also has this huge driving internet force with the Critical Roles and, Acquisitions Incorporated and anybody else that I could throw around as far as the name. Because there's tons of
Ghost of Saltmarsh and the Greyhawk Adventures, and
exactly.
Here in Wicked Studios every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or daylight time, depending on which part of the year we're in.
Yeah,
I never know the difference.
But basically, what you see starting to happen is that these role playing's taken into these formats, D&D's taken into these formats, and it's made into a consumable. It is now it is a show.
Right. You're making now effectively, it started off as you're telling a story together.
Right.
Now, then you went into the whole MMORPG nonsense with 4th edition. It didn't work because there were some good things that came from it, but overall it was a different animal and it never took off. Now you've got the movie version of D&D, basically.
Exactly, and that's what's happening. And so what happens now is that in 5th edition, there's so much backstory, there's so much role-playing that's going on, and it's like, well, you don't want to kill that character.
Unless you're Will and you're
I don't give a shit. I'm old school. Yeah. And so it has become this great big thing. It's like, well, you can't kill characters because when you kill a character, I mean, that's my character. But the thing that's happened is before, in the olden days, players missed out on the joy of the in-depth role playing.
Right.
Now, in today's day, the pendulum is swung the other way, and we have this great, rich role playing, but it's lacking that one thing that really makes it so that it is gives it something more, it's the possibility of character death. Now, characters still die.
There, I think what it is more so than that is that it waters down the strategy element. Because it was very importantly, again, when I started, and for the most time that I've played D&D, although I'm catching up now with 5th edition, I think probably at this point, but with 2nd edition. So we, and I don't know how it is with other people, but with my group of friends when we played, it was very, role play heavy. But a lot of the folks that I played with were, actors, writers. I mean, we were, teens and 20s, but still it was actors, writers, artists, a real creative group. So, so that's why we tended to do that. But at the same time, the strategy was very important.
Yes.
Whereas in 5th edition, there are moments where the strategy is important, but if you just go in guns a-blazing, you can still get out of many encounters as a group fine.
And this is something having DM'd for as long as I have, and starting to DM new modernized 5th edition versions of older games, I definitely see the translation where Wizards of the Coast or anybody who's official, when they bring out something and they do it. Like, for example, when they did Princess of the Apocalypse, which is a modernized version of what they wanted, what Temple of Elemental Eden. Okay. Now, Temple of Elemental Evil, that's got some serious shit in it, man.
Yeah. I never played it, but I always heard about it.
There are a ton of, you're dead. That's like, there's no save on that. You're just dead. You shouldn't have been fucking with that. It's like, it's like there's a big lever there with the sticker on it. It says, pull me. What do you do? I pull it. You're dead. There's a lot of that kind of shit that's going on in there. But in 5th edition, in the way that even the modules are written nowadays, that's not there. And I think what we've had a pendulum go from one extreme to the next, and we're going to need to see it start to swing back to more of a medium.
I'll tell you what, I thought and I haven't played all of the new modules, of course, but I mentioned Tomb of Annihilation. That one, I think they've actually done a pretty nice job of meeting in the middle.
That's a really good example. You're correct.
And one of the things that I had heard, when they were first announcing this, it's, don't get too attached to your character, right? Because you're going to die now. And it's a very lethal thing. And we've had many character deaths. Will's gone through 2, in this one. I've gone through 1. So I'm on my 2nd now. But I think that there's the way that they wrote it, which I wasn't expecting when we first started playing it. They made a really interesting story. They made but the story is so different, different ways you play, because you're not going to hit anywhere near all of the pieces of the adventure. Certainly in one, campaign, but it had interesting NPCs, interesting, world behind it, like the different things. So there was that element of danger, but it helped also facilitate good role playing.
Right.
Then you get to the, to the actual temple itself, when now all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, now I know what you're talking about. Now we gotta, move. But at that point, you've grown attached to, probably your 2nd or 3rd character at that time. But
this is a good example of where they've taken some of the old school spirit with the lessons that they've learned coming up and now that are prevalent, and they mixed them. And this is one of the reasons why, if you go out and you go on the internet and you look at the ratings of which of the 5th edition modules are the best, Tomb of Annihilation is at the top. It's funny how it always seems to be whichever one comes out
last.
Last is always up there, but we won't get into that. That's called marketing. No. But and that's the reason for it. And I think basically what it is if anything, Dungeon Masters should, one, before the start of an adventure, talk with your players and have this conversation about it. Because this conversation, what it'll do, it's going to bring it up so not everybody's going to be surprised about what's going on or what's happening, and they'll be able to deal with the thing. Like in the old days, players didn't get really because it was expected. And the thing of it is when your character didn't die, though, it was that much more special. It's like, I've survived. I continue on. It's like, that guy died, but I'm still here. Now, don't do it to an extreme, but because you don't want to lose the good role-playing part of it. But and have that conversation with your players about that sort of thing, and about character death and so forth and so on. Should it be more prevalent than it is it okay if we do these certain things? Like, let's just say, for example, to make things a little bit more deadly and put more skin in the game and to have it mean more in the end, just simple little tweaks could do it if you want. You don't have to. I mean, if you prefer playing it just the way it is, by all means.
Well, even just like they do in meat grinder mode, quote unquote, have a 15 as the DC versus 10 for your saving throw.
Yeah. Or just as an example, you could get rid of one spell, aka get rid of healing word.
I hate when you get rid of spells and stuff like that. That just means that the DM wants to kill you. But anyway, last question I have, because we are well past time.
Yes.
Which edition, just focusing on death, do you prefer?
My preference for editions when it comes for death, it's got to be 3rd. has to be third edition, because third edition is where it's, to my, in my opinion, it's the middle ground between where we are at today and where we used to be. You still have plenty of different things to help you with your characters. There's plenty of feats. There's feats like the Die Hard feat. You can build your character a certain way if you want them to be more survivable, versus like a glass cannon sort of thing. So third, I think, is still the one that does that the best. Now, third is not my favorite.
Right, we're just talking death.
Death. It's got to be third edition, without a doubt.
Anyway, folks, in the comments, talk about what is your favorite edition in terms of death, and what do you think about death in D&D as a whole. So,
and if you're watching us on YouTube and whatnot, make sure to hit the follow.
Yeah, so subscribe, like, follow, whatever you're watching this on, do that thing, and you'll get more of these down rolls and other shit, because we do other shit too.
Sometimes.
Often. So anyway, for Will DM, I'm Adam, and we will see you next time on the down roll.